Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's DCPS Reopen Strong Community Town Hall. My name is Tomas Talamante, and I'm Deputy Chief of Staff to Mayor Muriel Bowser. I want to thank you all for joining us as we hear from Chancellor Farabee and the DCPS team on Term 3 planning for DCPS. I want to go over a few housekeeping items as I do each week for our calls. I want to remind again, if you are watching from home on our social media streams, whether that's Facebook or Twitter, you can ask your questions directly on the Facebook or Twitter feed. And if you are joining us by phone, you can ask your questions by pressing 0 now to be entered on the question queue. Again, to press 0 now, you can get entered into the question queue for our Q&A portion of the program. So again, I'll just repeat that as we are at 5 o'clock, so I know a lot of people are dialing in still at this moment. But if you are watching online, you can ask your questions directly on the Facebook stream or on the Twitter stream, and we will get to some online questions. And again, if you are on the phone, joining us by phone, you can press 0 to be entered into the question queue. We'll hear shortly from the Chancellor, and then following the presentation by the Chancellor and DCPS, we will go into a Q&A portion of the program. So just to say it one more time, because I see a bunch of people still jumping into the line right now, we just want to remind everyone again, if you have any questions, at any portion of the call, you can press 0 now to be entered into the question queue, or you can ask your questions directly on Facebook or Twitter. So now we will go to Chancellor Dr. Louis Farabee, who will kick off today's town hall. Chancellor?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Tomas, for the introduction, and thank you, everyone, for joining us for tonight's conversation around DC Public Schools reopening the schools. It's important to note that we are tracking towards expanding in-person programming for Term 3, which begins on Monday, February the 1st. I am pleased to introduce members of my team that are here this evening to co-present. First, we have our Chief of Teaching and Learning, Corey Colgan, with us this evening. And we also have Dr. Brenda Elliott, who's our Chief of School Improvements and Support. Again, thank you, Dr. Elliott and Ms. Colgan, for joining us. Tonight, I just want to remind everyone on the next slide that we're very much so still committed to our health and safety commitments, which includes PPE for students and staff, our HVAC enhancements, ensuring that we're cohorting students in alignment with CDC and DC Health guidelines, along with all of our other layers to protect our students and staff. We, again, are tracking towards expanding in-person programming. Currently, we have care classrooms where students learn remotely in their school buildings with either staff or partners. And then we have a pilot of our in-person learning classrooms that are happening at select schools with a teacher teaching a cohort of students either 4 to 4.5 days a week. So go to the next slide. I want to remind everyone of what our planning process was for developing plans for Term 3. Each of our schools engage in a very grassroots process of conversation and dialogue with a diverse team of either students, parents, and staff, community members. Those teams comprised about 12 to 15 people that gave voice and gave input to the school leaders on how to best serve their school populations. And the result of that work, all of the school plans look very different. We have various models that are being implemented, and Corey Colgan is going to talk a little bit more about how we are thinking about accelerating academic achievement as we track towards Term 3. But the schools were asked 2 critical questions, and then how do you best support students academically? How might that look different by grade level? And we're proud to report 100% of our schools have completed the reopening community core planning process, and schools then began the process of staffing in alignment with those plans and making seat offers to families in alignment with those plans. So go to the next slide. going to have an opportunity to hear directly from Ms. Colgan, who's going to share a little bit more about the way that we're thinking about our academic supports for students in the various models that are going to be implemented.
Thank you, Chancellor. Good evening. As the Chancellor noted, the reopening community cores worked really hard as teams to think about which model would best fit the students' needs for their particular community, as well as taking into consideration school size, classroom size, staff availability, et cetera. And so the teams were given various models as starting points, and considerations for each of those models, pros and cons, what might make each model the most successful. And as the Chancellor noted, each school team landed on the models that would work best for them. And it's important to note that even within a school, multiple models may be in use. So they may have determined one model for their earliest learners and a different model for older students, or it may just vary grade by grade. Some of the models include one teacher teaching solely a group of students in person 4 or 4.5 days a week, while other students remain in a virtual setting with other teachers. Other models may be a mix of 2 different teachers, where one teacher is teaching students part of the week in person, and then those students are taught by another teacher virtually the rest of the week. And that often is in cases where teachers are departmentalized and teaching different content areas. So you can see a little bit more about the various models, but it's important to note that our elementary students were prioritized based on particular priority groupings, such as students experiencing homelessness, special education or English language learners, or students designated at risk. And those groups were prioritized, and then other students were invited as space was available. And to date, as of January 25th, we have 4,900 pre-K through 5 students who have accepted in-person learning seats. On the next slide, you can see some examples of the secondary models. Secondary, of course, because of the nature of secondary education, where students are going to be in different classes with different groups of students and different teachers for each subject area, maintaining the cohort was a little bit more challenging. And so our secondary schools did a great job looking at the data and being really focused on where student need was the greatest and determined their plans according to that. So in some cases, certain grade levels were prioritized, such as maybe 9th graders who are experiencing high school for the first time, who could more easily be cohorted, or 12th graders who are in that critical year of preparation for college and career. So each school, again, worked with the data that they had available to them about how their students were performing, and worked as a team to determine what would be best. Many of our secondary schools will be having students continue to engage in their coursework virtually, but have created in-person opportunities for them to get additional teaching and support from teachers, some of their teachers, particularly in content areas where they need the most support. And so that is often called in our secondary model a seed classroom or a seed model. Social emotional academic development, where students are coming in person to receive the additional supports they need that will help them to be more successful in their virtual coursework. And to date, we have 2,200 6th through 12th grade students who have accepted their in-person seats. So I will turn it back. Oh, I did want to give you a little bit more information on the next slide about one of the particular models that I know a number of our teachers and schools are using, and that people may be curious and have some questions about. And this is what we call our combined teaching model. So in this model, the teacher is teaching both a group of students in person in the classroom, as well as continuing to teach the remainder of their students virtually. So this classroom community is made up of students in the classroom and learning from home. One of the greatest pros to this model is that the teacher gets to maintain, the teacher and students maintain that classroom culture and community that they have set up. And so the relationships are there, and then some of those students are coming in person. Of course, one of the challenges that we will be working through as our educators transition to this model is just juggling the various planning needs that this model demands. And so we've been working with teachers to provide them with resources that they can use to prepare and learn to how best to utilize this model. But one clarifying point that I did want to make is there may be some confusion that in this model, the students at home are just watching a live recording of the classroom. And so it's almost like they're just watching television. And I want to be clear that that is not the case, that there are lots of other ways that teachers can engage the students at home alongside their peers in the classroom. So some of the approaches that we have been working with our teachers on is a chunking of the lesson where part of the lesson is taught to the students in person. They can get started on group or individual work, and then the teacher turns their attention fully to the students virtually and can teach a portion of the lesson there. Similarly, we can utilize station rotations, which are often used in the classroom anyways, and really can be adapted easily to the combined model setup. And then finally, when we do want to have whole class instruction, because it's great to have that community feel and to have a whole class discussion at times, teachers can use their laptop device as well as a smartboard or projector in the classroom to project the faces of the students at home so they can all look at each other and have that sense of community in the classroom. Or you can also, of course, project documents that you are teaching off of for the students in the classroom to see while the students at home are seeing them through their devices. So we'll talk a little bit more later about the ways we will continue to support teachers with this model, but I know it's the most different model that we have in place, and so we wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit more about it. So I am going to turn it back now to the Chancellor to talk a little bit about the preparation of our school buildings.
Thank you, Ms. Colgan. So on the next slide, it's my pleasure to remind everyone that we've done a lot of work with our facilities to ensure it is in alignment with our building readiness standard. We've completed that process for our pre-K through K campuses that have been open. And this week, we've closed the building readiness process for our secondary schools. We're excited that we had many members of our community, staff members participate and have a view firsthand of how our campuses have been shaped and formed into phenomenal learning spaces that are aligned with our health and safety commitments. You can also see evidence of our transparency around our health and safety commitments, given our reporting on positive cases. Also, we've reported all of our HVAC enhancements for the public, and we continue to provide a transparent view into our daily operations. To share a little bit more about our COVID-19 commitments, I'm going to turn to Dr. Elliott, who's going to give you more context of how we're fulfilling those health commitments.
Thank you, Dr. Farabee. In DCPS, we believe that keeping our schools safe and healthy is a shared responsibility between our staff, our students, and our families. We, in addition to the things Dr. Farabee has mentioned, we have developed clear guidance for our staff with regards to our expectations around all safety procedures, including hygiene, mask wearing, and social distancing practices. In addition to that, we have additional staff that we've allocated to our schools to support screening, COVID screenings, temperature checks, as well as monitoring our health isolation rooms. So let's talk a little bit about what our commitments and expectations are for our families. We have developed, with feedback from a number of folks in our family engagement teams, guidance documents for our families that kind of lay out what our expectations are. So we want our families to be sure when they send their students to school that they have conducted checks to ensure that they are symptom-free. We have provided the Ask, Look protocol to our families, developed videos on our website that help make it really clear and easy for families to know what those expectations are, and they are in multiple languages to help families for whom English is not their first language. We ask our families to acknowledge that their students are able to participate in our COVID testing protocols on school site, either through if they are asymptomatic or symptomatic, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We also ask our families to ensure that their students have completed their immunizations. So we don't want students to be at risk for communicable diseases at this point when there is vaccinations that are available for those diseases. is. We ask our families to acknowledge their willingness to participate in our daily temperature screenings. And we, most importantly, want our families to be sure that they are reiterating these safety procedures at home. So as kids may be out in the community or with their friends, we still want to be sure that families are ensuring that they're wearing their mask, washing their hands frequently, and social distancing so that they reduce the risk of them getting COVID and unexpectedly bringing that to schools. We ask our families to please keep their students at home. If there is a family member in the household that has contracted COVID, and to inform the school if they or their students travel to any of the high-risk areas. And then finally, we ask our families to agree to limit entrance into our school building, knowing that we're trying to ensure that our students and staff are safe, and we want to limit folks from the outside that are coming in. Next slide, please. Another important component of our COVID safety and health commitments is our COVID testing protocols. We are pleased to be able to provide both asymptomatic and symptomatic testing to both our students and our staff that are participating in in-person learning. DC Health manages our on-site testing for students for asymptomatic testing, and it is a process by which families can sign a consent form for their students to participate in testing at their school if they're asymptomatic on about 10-day rotation, and this includes the administration of the PCR nasal swab test. If a positive result is reported, the student as well as their cohort will be required to quarantine, and we provide notifications to those close contacts as well as a communication to the school community in general. So everyone is very clear when we have an incident reported in our schools. For staff members that want to participate in asymptomatic testing, they are able to receive a self-administered test kit at their home in the mail on about a weekly basis rotation. And this is totally voluntary if staff members want to participate. For this program, when a positive test is reported, we also notify close contacts so that they know who needs to be quarantined, and we also notify our school community. With regard to symptomatic testing, so this is a staff member or a student that they have arrived to school, and throughout the school day, they start to display some COVID-related symptoms. For our students, if parents sign consent forms, students are able to participate both in the on-site rapid and PCR testing if they have symptoms on campus. When a positive result is tested again for this program as well, we require that the student and the classroom cohort are quarantined, and notification is sent to our school community more broadly. For school staff members, if they develop symptoms during the school day, we are able to contact DC Health, who will send a school nurse to the site for the staff member to be tested. The staff member can also choose to just follow up with their health provider. So they have a couple of options, but we want to make it very easy for any staff member to get tested right away. We could go to the next slide. And finally, we're so excited that the mayor has prioritized DC Public Schools staff for vaccination. We actually had our first vaccination clinic on yesterday evening, and it was just such a joy to see our staff there so excited about having that extra protection as they prepare to come back to school. I think close to 500 staff members were able to get vaccines last night, so that's so exciting. Those clinics will run also on Thursday evening and Friday evening. That's happening at Dunbar High School, and all day Saturday of this week. So really excited for folks to get this extra protection as we prepare to return to school. This program is administered in partnership with Children's National Hospital. And it is available for our teachers coming back, but also our staff members and partners who are participating in our care classrooms, our food and nutrition services staff, our custodial staff, all of those folks also have the availability to get these vaccines. And we want to encourage them. I think there are a few slots remaining. Certainly want to encourage them to take advantage of this if they haven't already signed up. The second dose, so this is with this vaccine, there are 2 doses. The second dose will be received around mid-February, and what we're doing at the clinic is signing folks up for that second vaccine as soon as the first vaccination is administered. Now I'll turn it back over to the Chancellor.
Thank you, Dr. Elliott. I do want to remind families that we are thinking about how to best support you in this transition as we move towards term 3. So as a result, we've established a family guide for our in-person programming, which includes information about what to bring to school, what you should expect in school, and also other important information. So just a reminder to families to please go to our family guide to gather more information. Also a reminder, as we're at the end of term 2 and approaching term 3, that families can go into Aspen to access scheduling information. Also, Canvas is another resource for accessing course-specific materials and any content students will need for learning. In addition to that, just a reminder also that Canvas can be a communication tool to and from with our teachers as well. So again, reminder to families to please log into those platforms. We'll go to the next slide. I believe we're going to turn it back over to Dr. Elliott. Briefly, I do want to remind everyone that we have had some questions about transportation, and we want to remind everyone that we are still collaborating with WMATA. We're still collaborating with the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, along with DDOT, to ensure that all modes of transportation are readily available for students as they prepare to gear up for transition and travel to our schools for term 3. And we also have on the slide, you can see some of the standards for WMATA, and students can continue to have access to their Kids Ride Free cards. If they don't have access to a card, we're reminding them to reach out directly to their school to access a card for transportation. I'm going to transition to the next slide. On last slide, we have some dates here. Just a reminder, this week we're closing out term 2. We're closing out our vaccinations. Thank you again, Dr. Elliott, for the work done on the vaccinations. That will close out on Saturday the 30th, and we also are reminding families that on this coming Friday there is no school for students as we're closing out grading for term 2, and then term 3 begins on Monday, February 1st. And to just turn back quickly to you, Dr. Elliott, I want to confirm that dose 2 for the vaccine for employees will be on February 15th and February 16th?
That is correct.
Okay, great. So for all of our teachers that and staff members that are working in person that have signed up, you have opportunity to sign up for your second shot when you come get vaccinated. And for those that you're still interested, I believe we have a few more slots available for the remainder of the week. Thank you again to our families and our staff for helping us reopen strong for term 3.
Thank you, Chancellor. So now we'll go into the Q&A portion of the program. And I do want to remind everyone, if you've not been able to get into the question queue, you can press 0 now to be entered into the question queue. As we have residents coming into the question queue, I'm going to go to a question online from Ms. Victoria. The question is, how do families authorize the asymptomatic testing of students, and how often will that testing be occurring?
So that testing occurs approximately every 10 days at the school site. And I'm going to have Dr. Elliott speak a little bit more to what families need to do to opt into the asymptomatic testing.
Thank you, Chancellor. There is a consent form that schools are providing. So, as we open more seats for term 3, families will be receiving a packet from their schools that will include our parent and family agreement around our expectations around learning in a COVID environment. They'll also receive a copy of the asymptomatic testing consent form and the symptomatic testing consent form. So we ask families to please review those with your students and send them back right away.
Thank you. We're going to go to our next question from Jonathan in Ward 6. Jonathan, your line is unmuted. Jonathan in Ward 6, your line is unmuted.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
The vaccination plan, does that apply to substitutes, and is the process the same as for teachers?
Thank you, Jonathan, for the question. We are offering currently the vaccine to anyone who's working in person, that is a staff member or partner. So if you have been asked to work in person, you should be eligible. If you have not received information about how to register for the vaccine, happy to have you reach out to me directly or our staff who can point you in the right direction.
Thank you, Chancellor. We're going to go to the next question from this is going to be from Rebecca in Ward 1. Rebecca, your line is unmuted.
Hi, thanks so much for hearing what I have to say and for giving the information so clearly. I wanted to speak on behalf of hundreds of DC families who are in favor of opening and just tell you how excited we are to have our kids back in class. I wanted to urge the mayor's office to continue to do everything she can to make it safe to do so and to prioritize kids in education, including, I think, closing restaurants. Finally, my question is, I wanted to ask the Chancellor about, I know it's a lot to think about now when you've got reopening coming next week, but I wanted to ask about what long-term plans there are for managing learning loss, including summer learning and fall programming.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca, for your questions, and we appreciate your support for our reopening plans. I can't say enough about our staff who's been working hard to get us where we are. We are thinking about and planning for more supports for the spring and summer, which includes a heavy emphasis on high-dose tutoring. The high-dose tutoring model will be more of a 1-to-1 or 3-to-1 adult ratio to student to give additional learning time to those students who may need it the most. And then our next tier of support would be what we're calling acceleration academies, which would be brief periods of time of 2 to 3 weeks in which we would focus on a particular area of a standard or a gap where we know students may need additional support. And then finally, enrichment. You know, as we go towards our reopening activities, I want to be clear that our teachers, our educators are not going to start day one with rushing into the academics. We know that we need to reconnect with our students. We know that there's a lot of social emotional work that needs to be done, and relationships need to be rebuilt. So as a part of our summer and spring plan, we'll include more activities for enrichment. Many of those activities can be done outside. And then we also are thinking about those students that are transitioning to either from elementary to middle to high school, and then our youngest learners that will be transitioning to pre-K3 and pre-K4.
Thank you, Chancellor. This next question is going to come from online. If a parent or a student or staff member see any conditions that should be reported up that aren't following the guidelines set by DCPS leadership for safe reopening, where can they report those type of issues up?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's important to note that we have a hotline. If you go to the DCPS Reopen Strong website, you can see how to utilize that hotline. You can call in directly to express a concern with any of our health and safety protocols, or you can send an email, and you can find that email address also on the reopenstrong.com website.
Thank you, Chancellor. We're going to go next to Maria Wallace in Ward 8. Maria, your line is unmuted.
Yes, good afternoon. My question is in reference to the special needs students. What do you have in line, in place for that group of students who've missed almost a year of social interaction and their resources that they get every week? What's the plan for that group of students?
Yeah, good evening, Maria. Thank you for your question around our students that are receiving special education services. We've been working hard to ensure that there's space for our related service providers to provide as much of those services remotely as possible. We're looking forward to the in-person programming plan for term 3, which will allow more of our students to be on campus. About 70% of our schools that will be open for term 3 will have self-contained special education programming. So if those students are on campus, that gives us ability to deepen the connections with service providers and also give students the ability to receive some key services that they may not have been able to receive at home. Our special education students receiving special education service will also be in our plans for acceleration, where we can give students more time. And of course, we're always thinking about how we can creatively use technology to help advance outcomes for those students as well. We're also looking forward to the ability of our in-person programming to allow for us to complete some of our assessments and identification procedures for those students that may need services for special education.
Thank you, Chancellor. We're going to go to the next question from Rebecca online. How quickly does DCPS communicate to staff and students if somebody, a student or a teacher, is positive following the asymptomatic testing?
Yeah, our protocol is that close contacts are notified as soon as we receive a report of a positive case that occurs within 24 hours. And then our school notification goes out within 48 hours, and all of our school notification goes to the entire school community. And that information can also be found on our DCPS Reopen Strong website, where we provide an overview of all the community reports for positive cases for every school.
Our next question is going to go to Brittany from Ward 7. Brittany, your line is unmuted.
Good afternoon. I have a two-part question. The first part is, what's the scheduling frequency for ninth graders to go to school? And the second part of my question is, have you all considered, or have there been any talks about extending the school year?
Good evening, Brittany. At this time, we have not discussed extending the school year. However, we have discussed plans for extended learning time over the summer for those students who need it for either academic or social emotional support. So it may feel like an extended year for some of our students. For our ninth graders specifically, we have thought about summer bridge activities. We had that last year for those students going from 8th to 9th, but we are likely to have some activities for our current ninth graders, knowing that they may not have had the opportunity to have a true high school experience this school year. And as mentioned earlier, the schedules for our high school students do vary a lot. So that could be one day, a half a day, or four and a half days a week for a high school student. Based on some of the models made. So I'll turn over to Ms. Kogan a little bit to just reiterate some of the points around our high school models and what families should expect.
Sure, and I think I heard Brittany ask about 8th grade in particular. I may have misheard that, but it would be basically the same for both 8th and 9th grade, that it is, as the Chancellor said, dependent on the plan that your school community has put together. And so some examples would be that there are small groups of students who are coming in. It could be up to 4 days or 4.5 days a week. But I think more often in the secondary schools, we are seeing students coming in 1 to 2 days a week to get some really targeted and intentional supports from some of their teachers That could be core content teachers, that could be special educators if they're students with IEPs, or English as second language support teachers if they're English learners. So it really does depend, unfortunately, on your student and the school, so we wouldn't be able to answer that specifically, but I would recommend if you have a current 8th grader that you reach out to the school and clarify, make sure you understand what options are available to your student.
Great, and we have time for just one more question, and it's going to be from online. The question is for the Chancellor. Chancellor, can you repeat where families can get the family resource guide that you just highlighted?
Yes, so families can get the resource guide through our DCPS Reopen Strong website. There are also information for families about Term 2 and Term 3 in Aspen, which is the platform where families access grades and schedules. And then Canvas would be the other platform which we utilize for our course content, and also it is a platform where teachers communicate directly with students.
Thank you, Chancellor. Well, that's it. That's all the time we have for this week's call, but I do want to thank Chancellor Farabee and the DCPS leadership team for joining us for today's call, as well as all of you that have joined us on phone, on Twitter, Facebook, and watching on DCN Channel 16. I do want to throw that website out one more time. That is dcpsreopenstrong.com. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope to talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.